Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 395, The Way of Initiation. This is 113 pages, so it's an intermediate read. It is by Rudolf Steiner, so one of the big names. This is, I think, one of his most foremost works, one of the first significant entries that he actually made under the broad heading of Theosophy. It was followed up with another work which is currently awaiting illustration, so there will be a twofer pretty soon here. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. Highly recommended. Now, number one for people who are interested specifically in Theosophy or Anthroposophy. Of course, later on Steiner schisms with mainline Theosophy under Besant over certain disagreements in doctrine. He founds his own thing, the Waldorf schools, etc., and becomes sort of his own occultist. This is a very early work by Steiner, and it's very popular. It's fairly well known. The main gist is talking about the process of initiation. Now, the first, I think, 10-15 pages of this work is actually about the life of Steiner. It was written by Edouard Schur, one of his contemporaries. That's why I used the second edition, because I felt like that fleshed it out more. First edition, of course, initially translated, it doesn't have the bit actually about the author. Steiner was known, by the way, for oratory. The number of works that under his name were released over his lifetime is in the many hundreds. He was extremely prolific, and a lot of it, I believe, was effectively transcribed. For instance, Occult Significance of Blood, which I edited long ago. It's, by the way, been fully re-illustrated by Raven Feather Illustrations, as all new works are. Again, though, highly recommended. The basic concept of initiation, the basic premise here, is part mental practice and behavioral. It's more on the pragmatic end. And this, by the way, later is sort of why Steiner appears to have deviated from mainline Theosophy. He delved more into the sociological impact of spirituality, the pragmatic sort of how can we improve society thing, as opposed to the more pure study angle, it seems. And so there were doctrinal differences there, and unlike, in many cases, Theosophists had different focuses, and they just sort of left each other alone. Steiner appears to have wanted more of a pragmatic overhaul, and of course, Besant was in charge. It talks about, for instance, the probation period, the enlightenment period, and then full initiation. The lesser and greater guardians of the threshold are mentioned here, and these are said by Steiner not to be entirely abstract concepts, that these are actual spiritual sort of forces that await the person who's undergoing enlightenment and the process of initiation into the theosophical occultism. The idea is a transformation of the energy centers of the body. This is vaguely Hindu and Buddhist in derivation. It talks about the chakras, etc., the control of them, the use of them, and that force. He speaks briefly about Kundalini. So this is more of an Eastern-esque influence that you see. Steiner later on leans more Western. It seems that he, over time, initially was more like Besant. Besant was obsessed specifically with India and with Hinduism, wrote a number of sociological tracts actually on Indian liberation and things of that nature, and social progress for the castes and things. He appears to have transformed over the subsequent decades more towards the strictly pragmatic and more Occidental as opposed to Oriental. So it's very interesting, and also those of you who aren't necessarily, you're not interested in Theosophy specifically, just as a historical piece because of its significance within broader occultism and Steiner's influence on other paths as well, both within and without Theosophy, it's still interesting, and it does contain a fairly lengthy bit about actually Steiner himself. So if you're interested in that brief autobiographical material, regardless, I would recommend this to basically everyone. In fact, I think I'd put this in with Cavendish Black Arts, Waite's Ceremonial Magic, and Dower's Occultism for Beginners as probably recommended reading for someone who is just barely starting out. You don't have to agree with initiatory processes into Theosophy in the more greater sense. Still excellent work, genuine occultism. Very interesting. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. I think this is the third Steiner work that I've actually edited, so there is more available. That's about all. Peace out.